Hello and welcome back. I'm Holly from At Yarn's Length, and if you're just joining us, I do encourage you to go back and watch part one of this two-part series. We cover Russian stitch and some of the mosaic knitting basics, and it's linked below. So this week we're going to talk about the Macedonian stitch. Both of these tutorials were developed for the Spring Stitch Sampler Knit Along, and if you aren't participating, you can still find some good information here about how to knit this stitch or the technique of mosaic knitting. But if you are interested in participating, it's linked below. Today you'll get a chance to practice the basics. You'll knit a swatch in Macedonian stitch. And pattern aside, it does have a couple little surprises that make it different from Russian stitch. The swatch itself is going to be about as wide, so if you joined us for the last video, that was 16 stitches. I have 15 here. I used a knitted cast on. You can use the cast on that works best for you. As you can see in the chart below, twice in this pattern we're going to be knitting straight across, so down and back, since we're using the mosaic technique. So that's a nice little interesting break from slipping stitches. It also gives us the chance to get started directly with row 1 and 2 instead of having to have two setup rows. Okay, so rows 1 and 2 we're going to go ahead and knit, and they are in fact the setup rows and the first and second row. That's a kind of cool thing about this stitch. Okay, so it kind of looks like it doesn't have a border in that regard. So I'm just going to knit all the way down and knit all the way back. If you are just joining us and didn't watch the previous video, we're using garter stitch mosaic knitting. You can do stockinette stitch with mosaic knitting. We're just choosing not to for this particular pattern. It's really up to your preference. Okay, so knit down one, I'm going to knit back. Try to get my tail out of the way so I don't accidentally knit with that. We've all been there, right? All right, so this is the easy peasy part, this setup. And the pattern is linked below, the written pattern as well as the chart. If you want to follow along with us, you'll be able to see that row 3, which we're going to start in our second color, row 3 begins with a knit 3. So I'm going to get ready, get my yarn ready, and just kind of dangle it a bit there. So I've got some wiggle room. And I always end up accidentally pulling that out a little too tight. Once I get a couple stitches down, I just give it a little tug and kind of even that tension out. There we go. All right, so we've got a knit 3, slip 1, knit 3. Knit 3, slip 1, knit 3. And we're going to do that all the way down. Slip 1, knit 3, slip 1, knit 3. And remember, when we're on the right side of our work, which is an odd row, we are always slipping with our yarn in the back, which is kind of, I feel like that's the natural way to slip, right? Because it just kind of mimics the stitch of knitting. We're going to turn for row 2, and for all even rows, you do not even need to refer back to that pattern. If it was knit last time, you knit it this time. So in this case, we're knitting all the white stitches. So we're going to preserve that color in this line, and we're slipping with our yarn in front this time so that the right side of the work always shows the color we want to show. We're going to slip the ones that were slipped. And I think I mentioned this before, if you're worried about tension, sometimes I put my thumb here to kind of hold that, give it a little extra room, because sometimes we have a tendency to knit really tight. Especially if we're doing something new, sometimes that level of anxiety sets in. So I just kind of do that so that we don't end up with any warps. And look, this guy's getting a little wonky again, so I'm just gonna tug him so that he's in the right spot. So here's the right side of my work. You can see rows 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Line it up nicely, looking good. Let's keep going. So again, we're always going to start with a stitch that's knit on every row, and we're just going to carry up the yarn that we're using up the side of the work. It's not going to end up funky or anything like that because it's such a short distance that you wouldn't even notice. So we're going to knit 2 for row 5, slip 1 and knit 1 till we get to 1 stitch left. So we got a lot of slipping going on here. It's where you can really practice that even tension. And we have 1 stitch left. What are we going to do with it? Hope you said knit it, because we always knit the first and the last stitch with mosaic knitting. Never slip it. On the way back, we're going to knit 2. And then we're slipping on the other side, so it gets a little bit more time consuming going back and forth and back and forth. But it's easy to see if we make a mistake on this side because it's supposed to be matchy-matchy. So you can just take your time. And we'll end it with the knit 2 that we started it with. And there we go, that's row 5 and 6. So if we hold it right there, we can see, yep, we're working it, right? Okay, now we're on to 7 and back to white. My yarn is getting a little tangled over here. I think I mentioned in the last video that I have kittens that get a little excited if the yarn hangs off the edge of the desk. So I have to be really careful when I'm working so that I don't have a tail dangling down, because then they kind of hop on it. All right, so for 7 we're gonna knit 1, slip 1, knit 3 until we get to 2 left. So slip 1, knit 3. Just gonna get this guy out of the way. Slip 1, knit 3, slip 1, knit 3, and we're left with 2, just as the pattern says. We're going to slip 1, knit 1. Right, that was 7, so this is 8. We're going to go right back the way we came. Now our last stitch, the Russian stitch, was only 8 rows long. This one is 16 rows long, so it's a hair narrower than what we were knitting, but it's twice as long, so it is a little more time consuming. Whoop. Almost lost my stitch there. Okay, so this is what we've got going on after 8 rows. Now you don't even need to look at the pattern, because you can see that for row 9 we're just going straight down and back. So let's bring that blue up and head straight down and back. Now, I don't know if I mentioned that the yarn I'm using is Red Heart Super Saver. The colors are white and blue. It doesn't get any more basic than that, right? But even though they're just white and blue and not, you know, snow cap and aqua or something like that, they provide an excellent contrast to one another that really helps you see, especially with mosaic knitting, the type of stitch that you're working. So I'd encourage you, you know, especially if you're doing the sampler with us, to kind of play with these stitches and see which way you like them. You can see what this looks like in the chart right here, or what it's going to look like when we're done. But if you were to imagine that all of the white was dark and all of the dark was white, you would have a very different picture. And so you can definitely work it by swapping your colors, your color A and your color B, just to get a different feel for the stitch, you know, and see how it kind of looks like it's inverse of what it's supposed to be. Although I guess what it's supposed to be is, you know, whatever you make it. All right, we're closing up row 9 and 10, which I think I called row 8 earlier. but row 9 and 10. So you can see this little design right here we've got going on right here. We've got an extra one though because we were doing multiple repeats, and this is the center that's repeated infinitely, you know, as wide as your project is. So we've got that. Now it's just the topper that we're working on, which is this, which is a mirror. So we're actually from here on out, 7 and 11, 13 and 5, 3 and 15, those rows are all going to be identical to one another. Okay, so you've worked each of these before. So bring white up, and we're going to slip 1, knit 3 till we get to the end. And when we get there, 2 stitches should remain. I'm getting some yarn tangle coming on over. That is one thing with all the turning back and forth. Sometimes the yarn does get tangled with the other color that you're using. 2 stitches remain, slip 1, knit 1. So if your yarn does get tangled up, just take a minute and undo it. Sometimes I end up with this sort of, this is an old school reference for those of you who remember when houses had phones and phones had cords, how you would pick up the phone and put it down the same way each time. You'd end up with this giant coil that sort of kinked up your phone cord, and you would have to take it off the hook and like dangle it and let it spin freely until it finally righted itself. But it's a very similar thing. You know, I always turn my work the same way, and I always pull from the same side, and so the yarn tends to end up in a big tangle that, you know, I should be able to just tangle my project and have it untangle, but too risky, right? Okay, so we can see that it's starting to look just like the row we knit. So let's keep going. Now we're on 13. And back to blue. Trying not to stretch out that first stitch too much so I don't have to tug at it, but it's not cooperating. 13 starts with a knit 2. Get that out of the way. And then we're going to slip 1, knit 1, all the way down until there's only 2 left. Slip 1, knit 1. And I did say this in the other, the most recent video, you're never going to slip a stitch that you worked. Oh, and then we're going to end with this color. 2 stitches remain. Oh, hold on. Yes, 1 stitch remains, knit 1. Whew, sorry, thought I slipped the wrong one. But no, it actually goes against what I was saying. These that we worked in blue before, that were slipped up, here, 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 and here, if we were ever coming across our work and we were saying, okay, slip 1, knit 1, slip 1, knit 1, because I say this to myself as I'm working the pattern, maybe you do too. Slip 1, knit 1, and I went to slip this one, and it was blue before, but I'm working with blue now. I don't need to slip that. I can knit it. You only are going to be slipping if you're pulling up a color from the row that you're not working with, so the previous row. You're never going to do 2 slips. You could just knit, right? So if you're working along and you do end up slipping something that's the same color you're working with, you got to stop and back up and see where you went wrong. These are the sort of things you pick up after messing it up yourself a couple times, right? Back and forth and back and forth. I'm gonna knit my last 2. All right. Ooh, excuse me. Okay. So we've done 13 and 14. Okay. And now we're going to do 15 and 16. So again, just bring that up. We're starting with a knit 3. And then we'll slip 1, knit 3 all the way over. And I'm going to caution you again, do not forget to work your final row with mosaic knitting. Often only the odd numbers are listed, but you need an even number of rows to make the look. So make sure you turn and work that final set each time, final row. Which again, we don't even have to look at, because we know if we knit it before, we're going to knit it this time. Right? Okay, so this is it. We have finished our first repeat of the swatch. You are definitely welcome to keep going and kind of see how that works out. Of course, since you'll finish 15 and 16 and go right back down to 1 and 2, you will have another pretty blue line there to cap that off. And that is how I recommended finishing the pattern as well. And the written swatch pattern was with a couple rows of the blue, just to add balance and like I said, cap that off. But that's what it looks like. And if we compare it to the chart, we're looking good, right? I do want to draw your attention to the chart. I've done something on this one a little bit differently. Last time we talked about how these edge stitches right here always have to match the row that you're on. And just as a refresher, if you see a dark square behind row 1, that is the color of yarn you're working with for 1 and 2, light yarn for 3 and 4. Okay. So the last time around, I did have one little rider row to show you guys how to do repeats. You would just repeat for Russian stitch everything in the box, and then tack on a rider row at the end to finish the work so that it had a more polished look and it didn't just dissolve into nothing. Couple folks said that they found that a little confusing. So with this one, I've got the full starter and the full ending stitches, and then the ones you're going to work in the middle. So you're going to start here, work these 3 stitches, repeat these 4 over and over and over again until you have 4 left, and then work those 4. Then you're going to switch to white and work these 3, and then you're going to repeat these, finish with these. So these are only worked once, and these are only worked once, and these are worked multiple times depending on the size of your swatch. Hopefully that helps folks understand it a little bit better. Again, if you hate charts, some people I know really hate charts, some hate written patterns. It's all about personal preference. You don't have to learn how to do this. Skip the chart and go for the written instructions if that's what works for you. As always, if you have questions, we do have a Facebook group, and I put the link down below. Also, you'll find the written pattern there, or a link to the written pattern there, as well as these charts, so you can print them out on your own if you prefer. I'll also put links to the next videos as they come up, and the previous videos, to our website, basically everything I can think of, including the yarn that I'm using, the needles that I'm using, anything I can think of. If you are so inclined, please like our video so other knitters can find it. And you're welcome to subscribe. That way when videos go live or are published, you'll get those each week, which will be really handy when this Spring Stitch Sampler launches. And again, that starts on May 3rd, and we'll have weekly releases from there. I hope to see you guys in a week. Take care.